Good afternoon. Today is Wednesday, April 29, and we are continuing on with the congruence tables, the definitions that is, for congruence using sides and angles. And this one is G for Geometry, IXL Skill, K3. And it's entitled Angle, Side Angle, and Angle Side Congruence. All right, so what we're going to be doing here is you're going to be able to determine triangle congruence, in this case using angle, side, angle, and angle, side. All right, the rule is as follows, and it's in the table here, and let me just move this up a little bit. So angle, side, angle congruence simply says that two angles and the side between them are congruent. Now notice these are corresponding angles and sides. If they do not correspond, you do not have angle, side, angle. Okay, and then the second rule that we'll be covering in the second example is angle, side. So here you see an angle, and a side. An angle, and a side. So you're looking for these kinds of orders. And of course, again, the rule for this one is two angles and a non-included side are congruent. And the angles always are, together, if you will, and the side's right next to one of them. Okay. So, again, don't forget to use your plastic sheeted paper to work these problems. This is a time when you may want to sketch your triangle. So, pull out, again, a piece of grid paper and slip it into the plastic. If you've not obtained one yet, you still can do that. Just go to math-aids.com. And you can enter there, and you can for free get this particular grid, which is a full page size grid, where the spacing is 1 block equals 1/4 inch. That's the scale, actually. Each one is a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch, or 1/4 inch squared. Okay, so let's go on to what we're doing today. So the first example we have is which two triangles out of a group of 3 are congruent by the angle, side, angle theorem. And we're going to complete the following congruence statement. So we have 3 triangles. We have triangle XYZ. We have triangle well, depending on which way we look at it, it could be CDE and triangle HJI. We'll clear that up in a little bit. The angle, side, angle theorem is listed below. It states that two triangles are congruent if and only if two angles and the included side of one triangle are congruent to the angles to two angles and the included side of the other triangle. And again, they must be corresponding angles and sides, right? Okay, so we want to find two triangles with out of this group of 3 with 2 pairs of congruent angles and congruent included sides. And if you look at your picture here, and you're looking for angles or triangles which should be congruent, they all have an angle, a side, an angle, side, angle, side, angle. So from that standpoint, they appear to be congruent. So let's look for corresponding parts. So we have an angle X with 2 arcs, an angle C with 2 arcs, and an angle H with 2 arcs. Those all appear to be the obtuse angle in each of these triangles, so they're definitely corresponding angles. And then we have triangle D across from triangle C here, the obtuse angle. So going from this obtuse angle to along the short leg for triangle XYZ, it appears that these two angles X and Z correspond to C and D. Okay, but then when you get over here to triangle JHI, if you look, this short angle here, it has one arc. Okay, we see that we've got one arc here, and we have the two arcs for the obtuse angle in question. So that seems to be in line. But if you look at the sides, side XZ has two tick marks, side DC has two tick marks, and side HI has one tick mark, which tells you this side is not congruent. Maybe slightly larger or slightly smaller than these other two, but it's not congruent. So you know which two triangles we're talking about, and those would be triangles ABC, or yeah, ABC, and it looks like ZXY. That's what they correspond to. Now, let's just find the corresponding parts. So we have angle B, that's congruent to angle Y. That looks about right. You have line segment BC. This side here is congruent to line segment XY. That looks right. And you look and you'll see that angle C is congruent to angle X, and that's correct too. And if you really look at these two triangles, they're mirror images of each other. So you'll notice that this is a side angle, or I'm sorry, angle side angle, and this is angle side angle. Okay, you know, definitely you can see the reflection. Two angles and the included side of triangle ABC are congruent then to two angles and the included side of triangle ZYX, pardon me. So these triangles are congruent by the angle side angle theorem. Okay? All right. So to write the congruent statement, you've got to match the corresponding vertices. So they're just retelling you what you visualize here. Okay? So they say, okay, since angle B is congruent to angle Y, okay, and angle C is congruent to angle X, okay, let me go back and forth so you can see that better. Angle B is congruent to angle Y. Here's angle B. Let's fix that a little better. Angle B is congruent to angle Y. And then they say angle C is congruent to angle X. And here is angle C is congruent to angle X. Get it up higher so you can see it better. And then lastly, they talk about point B corresponding to point Y and point C corresponding to point X. Okay, so B corresponds to Y, looks good. C corresponds to X, that looks good. So we have to assume then that A corresponds to Z. A is corresponding to Z. So one more time. B corresponds to Y. B corresponds to Y. C corresponds to X. C is corresponding to X, again, mirror images. And so we can assume then that A corresponds to Z. A corresponds to Z here. So the conclusion we can make again is that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle XYZ, which is up here. Okay? All right. So we have one more congruence statement to go over, and this one I'm going to keep it simple. We're going to do the work kind of together. This is which two triangles are congruent by the angle-angle-side congruence theorem. And so then we're going to complete the congruence statement here. So we've already gone through the basics as to how you step through proving what you need to know. We already know what the theorem is. Okay, so the angle-angle-side theorem states that two triangles are congruent if and only if I'm sorry, I meant to say the angle-angle-side. The angle-angle-side theorem states that two triangles are congruent if and only if two consecutive angles, so two consecutive angles and a side attached to one or the other of those angles are also congruent. So if we look at these three here that are on the screen that I've got here, you'll notice we've got, let's see, we have an angle here, we have an angle here and a side. We have an angle here and an angle here and a side. And we have an angle here, an angle here, and a side. So if you look at these, we can see they all have angles and sides that are being compared, but not all of them are congruent. If you look at triangle HJI, notice that the length of line segment JI is one tick mark, whereas the line segment for UTS here, triangle UTS, it also has one tick mark. But look at triangle EFG. Triangle EFG, its side that's included in this has two tick marks. So its side is smaller than the side showing in the other two triangles. Now I'm guessing smaller just because physically the picture is smaller, and these two pictures appear to be about the same size. Remember though, you cannot make a determination as to whether something is congruent just by eyeballing the picture. You have to look at the angle and the side tick marks. So here's an angle with two arcs. Here's an angle with two arcs. Here's an angle with one arc. Here's an angle with one arc. Here is a side with one tick mark and a side with one tick mark. So of the three here, these two triangles have to be congruent. Okay? So we know what the theorem is, and we want to write this so it will match. So now if we look at this, we can tell that angle S here and angle J seem to be at opposite sides of the two triangles, if you want to call them opposite sides, or let's say opposite vertices. Okay, it's down here at the bottom of the triangle, it's up here at the top. That's where you get the single arc congruent angle. And then the double arc angles, notice this one's at the bottom of its triangle, this one's at the top of its triangle. So it appears that the triangle is flip-flopped like this, reflection. And then you'll notice it's also reflected, so it's reflected this way, and secondarily it's reflected across, it's somewhere across the line in between these two triangles. So where does the angle hang? It hangs at the end of, or closest to the angle S here, and the angle J here where there's one mark. So having said that, let's start with this triangle, and HJI is angle, angle, side. So we're going to use that, HJI, okay? And on the second one over here, we've got our angle, angle, side. So we start here at U, that corresponds to the H, right? Then S, that corresponds to the J. And then at the other end of this side at T, that's the third letter. So those are the corresponding vertices. So we'll just write this out as S, U, T. All right. So let me kind of mark that in so it's a little easier to see. So triangle H, J, I is congruent to triangle S, U, T. And if you can't see that well enough, we'll just do it this way. Triangle H, J, I is congruent to triangle S, U, T. All right? So that is how you would set these up. If you do not put these vertices in the correct order corresponding to the appropriate angle or side, you will get this wrong. So make sure you're doing that. And the last thing I will say about this is make sure, again, that you are going through the examples that are at the beginning of these. Every one of these skills has, learn by example. You'll see it at the, there's a little tab at the very top of the first page, first problem meaning, and it's in red, I believe. You click on that and then it'll show you the example. And then also at the bottom, a lot of times at the beginning, there is a section that says, aren't sure about whether you know enough about this, click on this. And it will again give you information telling you how to do this. Write those things out on a separate sheet of paper. If you do that, you will be in a much better situation and shape to be able to do these problems. Okay? They aren't really difficult, it's just the order is important. It's corresponding sides, corresponding angles. Okay? All right, this is the end of today's material. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.